Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. His name was Ethan Carter, a brilliant young man, but shy and reserved. He had always been fascinated by Lila Montgomery, the most popular and charismatic girl in her high school. Her smile, her laughter, her aura seemed to light up every room she entered. Ethan thought that maybe, one day, she would notice him. But that day, everything changed. At a birthday party, he finally found the courage to talk to her, to confess his feelings, with all the sincerity and vulnerability he could muster. His heart was pounding. But instead of a tender smile, Lila burst out laughing, ridiculing him in front of everyone at the party. "You? Me? Don't be ridiculous, Ethan." The jeers flew, his friends' stares turning into bursts of cruel laughter. Ethan left the party, his face red, his hands shaking, and a humiliation etched in his mind forever. 2 years passed. 2 long years during which Ethan changed, silently but profoundly. He left the city to study, trained, built his confidence, and developed a plan no one could have suspected. The wounds of ego and unrequited love transformed into a cold determination. Today he was back. And this time, he wasn't the shy boy Lila had humiliated. This time, he was ready. Ready to take back what she had stolen from him, his dignity, his control, and maybe more. Because revenge, when carefully planned, can be irresistibly sweet. Ethan Carter would never forget that day. The laughter of Lila Montgomery still echoed in his head like a slap. The colorful lights of the birthday party flashed around him, but everything seemed blurred except for Lila's mocking face. "You? Me? Don't be ridiculous, Ethan." Her voice, both soft and icy, had broken something inside him. The other guests had followed her laughter, turning it into a public spectacle. Ethan had felt his heart break and his confidence extinguished in an instant. After that humiliation, he disappeared. 2 years of isolation, self-improvement, and silence. He had changed physically, taller, more confident, and with a bearing that commanded respect. But it wasn't just an outward transformation. His anger had transformed into a calculating intelligence and an icy determination. He would return to this city, and everyone would know that Ethan Carter was no longer the boy who was ridiculed. In this first chapter, we see him arrive in his hometown. The street seems small, familiar faces pass by, but none can guess the silent danger he now carries. And Lila? She doesn't know that the man she thought was weak and insignificant has returned to change everything. The chapter ends with this haunting thought from Ethan. "They'll remember my name. And Lila, she'll regret what she did to me." 2 years later, Ethan Carter crossed the threshold of his hometown. The streets hadn't changed much, the same cafes, the same storefronts, the same laughter and chatter. But to him, everything seemed different. He was no longer the shy, awkward boy who had been humiliated. His gaze slid over the crowd in the city center, and there he saw her, Lila Montgomery, always impeccable, smiling, surrounded by her friends. Her aura had lost none of its charm, but for Ethan, this charm was nothing more than a reminder of his past injury. Lila hadn't noticed yet. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, the perfect scene to observe her reaction. He didn't need to rush. Every detail mattered, his looks, his attitude, his voice. Everything had to show that he was no longer the fragile boy she had humiliated. He approached the cafe where she often sat after work. Every step was calculated, every gesture measured. He wanted her to notice him, but in his own way, subtle and powerful, not like before. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to stand still. Lila hesitated for a moment, a slight shudder of recognition, but Ethan looked away, as if he had never known her. Yet she felt this unusual presence, this new aura. She didn't yet know that this silent man was the same man she had once ridiculed. That first eye contact marked the beginning of a dangerous game. Ethan wasn't there for an apology or a reunion. He was there to charge, intelligently and methodically. The chapter ends with this inner thought from Ethan. 2 years, long enough to prepare my revenge. And now it all begins. Ethan didn't rush into anything. Patience was now his best ally. Since returning to the city, he spent his days discreetly observing Lila, studying her habits, her friends, her daily commute, and even her moments of vulnerability. Every detail would be useful in his revenge. He had signed up for a coffee shop near her office, just across the street from the building where she worked. Every morning, he saw her arrive, always immaculate, always smiling. Her natural arrogance and confidence seemed intact. But Ethan knew that behind that smile, there were flaws, habits he could exploit. He was no longer the shy, awkward boy she'd humiliated. His muscles and poise turned a few heads, but it wasn't to seduce. Every glance he received was a silent reminder of the transformation he'd made for himself. He had become a force she couldn't ignore. One day, while she was talking with a colleague over coffee, Ethan noticed a moment of hesitation in her movements. A subtle detail, she bit her lower lip when she was stressed. A sign he made a mental note of. He began to plan the first steps. It was not to brutally humiliate her as she had done to him, but to make her feel the same fear and uncertainty, to put her in a position where she could not control the situation. At the end of the day, as he left the cafe, Ethan spoke to himself in a low voice. Every detail counts. Every mistake she makes will be my gateway. And soon, she'll know who I really am. This chapter shows that Ethan is not acting impulsively. His plan is taking shape, methodical and silent, foreshadowing a coming confrontation that will be calculated and formidable. Ethan had waited patiently, but he knew it was time to take action. His first move would be subtle, make Lila feel like she was no longer in control. No direct confrontation yet, just a shiver of uncertainty that would begin to erode his confidence. He learned she was going to a professional event, an event where Lila loved to shine. A perfect opportunity. Ethan bought an elegant outfit, understated but impressive. He didn't need to be extravagant, his mere presence would be enough to attract attention. Arriving at the event, he stood in a corner, watching. Lila entered, beaming, surrounded by her colleagues. She laughed, commented, captivated the audience, until her gaze met Ethan's. For the first time in 2 years, she fully recognized him. Her smile flickered. A moment of silence passed through her mind, an uncomfortable shudder. Ethan made no move, no approach, just let his aura speak for him. His upright posture, his penetrating eyes and this new assurance were enough to sow doubt in Lila's mind. Who is this man? Later that evening, Ethan moved just close enough for Lila to notice him up close. Not a word, just an intense gaze. The eye contact created a subtle sense of unease. Lila's forced smiles betrayed her confusion and nervousness. She wondered if she was remembering him correctly, if she had changed, or if this was really Ethan. This chapter demonstrates the power of silence and presence. Ethan hasn't struck yet, but he's setting the stage. Lila begins to feel the strain of a power she no longer fully exerts over him. The chapter ends with Ethan's inner thoughts. Just enough to make her doubt. What comes next will be even more delicious. After his first appearance at the professional event, Ethan knew he had to act with even more finesse. His revenge wouldn't be brutal, it would be subtle, psychological, like a slow but inevitable poison. He began by taking an interest in Lila's surroundings. Her colleagues, her close friends, even some people she considered allies. Ethan knew that if she saw he could influence her environment, her usual control would falter. He began with small interventions, discreet compliments here, a remark that subtly corrected a project there. Lila's colleagues began to notice his skills and charisma, often at the expense of Lila's initiatives. She felt a strange pressure, as if someone had entered his perfectly ordered universe. One day, during an important meeting, Ethan made a calculated intervention. He proposed an innovative idea, simple but effective. Lila, surprised, found herself in the shadow of someone she couldn't immediately identify. Her colleagues began asking her questions, listening more closely than she would have liked. Lila felt her blood run cold. This feeling of loss of control, of doubt, was foreign to her. She didn't know who this man was, or how he had infiltrated her world so subtly. And yet, here he was, present in every decision, every look, every smile. Ethan, for his part, watched every reaction, noting the slightest hesitation, the slightest hint of fear or discomfort. His revenge was only just beginning, and already, the first crack in Lila's confidence was appearing. The chapter ends with Ethan's thought. She's starting to understand that not everything is under her control, and she likes it even less. Perfect. Ethan knew that for his revenge to be perfect, he had to force Lila to confront him, but without it looking like a direct attack. Every move had to be calculated, every encounter carefully orchestrated. He began to cross her path more frequently, at the cafe where she had lunch, in the corridors of her office, even on her outings in the city. Each appearance was short but memorable, an uncomfortable shudder, a reminder that he was there and knew her world better than she thought. During lunch with her colleagues, Lila noticed Ethan outside, watching her calmly. She felt her heart race. This time, he gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. But for her, this simple gesture was enough to create a deep sense of unease. She couldn't ignore his presence, and she didn't know how to react. Ethan also began to sow small seeds of uncertainty, subtle compliments to Lila's colleagues that undermined her credibility, information he slipped in precisely so she would lose her position of control in meetings. Lila found herself increasingly frustrated, unable to understand how this stranger seemed to anticipate each of his movements. This chapter marks a turning point. Fear and discomfort overtake Lila's confidence. Ethan has not yet revealed his identity, but his plan is moving forward. He plays on the power of doubt and perception, and Lila is now trapped in a game whose rules she doesn't know. The chapter ends with Ethan's thought. Every gesture, every look, every smile, everything serves to prepare for the moment when she will finally understand who I am. And on that day, she will regret everything. Until now, Ethan had operated in the shadows, playing on Lila's doubts and uncertainties. But he knew that the next phase required a subtle revelation of his identity. Not yet a complete confrontation, but enough for her to begin to feel the depth of her transformation. One evening, at a charity event Lila was hosting, Ethan walked in. He didn't need to be ostentatious, his natural presence and aura were enough. Lila, upon arriving, felt her heart sink when she met his eyes. This time, he didn't look away. Shock gripped her. The familiar features of her old classmate, the boy she had humiliated, were still there, but transformed by 2 years of discipline and maturity. Lila slowly realized it was him. Ethan approached her calmly and with control. No insults, no reproaches. Just a measured smile, cold and assured. "Good evening, Lila," he said in a low voice, laden with that mixture of charm and silent menace. The room seemed to disappear around them. All eyes saw only the palpable tension between them. Lila felt her world reel. The boy she had thought weak and ridiculous had become a man capable of making her lose everything, without another word. Ethan didn't just reveal his identity. He began to show her, through his actions, his intelligence and mastery of the situation. Every word was calculated, every smile an invisible blade. Lila was now aware that the game had just changed, and that the boy she had humiliated was no longer easy prey. The chapter ends with Ethan's thought. Now that she knows who I am, the real game can begin. And this time, she'll feel exactly what I felt. Now that Lila knew who he was, Ethan took the first direct step in his revenge. This was not yet a public humiliation, but a maneuver to make her feel like she was no longer in control. He knew that Lila liked everything around her to be perfect, her reputation impeccable. So he began to interfere in the moments when she thought she was untouchable. An important presentation at work, a dinner with prestigious clients, wherever she thought she reigned supreme, Ethan was nearby, with subtlety and precision. At a crucial meeting, Ethan intervened with an idea that cleverly countered one of Lila's suggestions. Not aggressive, not mocking, but effective and convincing. Her colleagues were immediately seduced by the solution, and Lila felt a thrill of panic. Her position, her confidence and her authority were being questioned in front of everyone. After the meeting, Lila tried to hide her frustration, but Ethan gave her an icy, almost imperceptible smile that said it all. "I'm here. And you know it. Later, he crossed paths with her in a cafe, where she usually ate lunch alone to think and plan her days. Ethan sat at a nearby table, close enough for her to feel his presence. Not a word was exchanged, just that piercing look. Lila, unable to concentrate, felt the unease rising inside her. For the first time, she understood that Ethan could take her life at any moment, and there was nothing she could do about it. This chapter shows that Ethan's revenge is becoming tangible. Lila begins to feel fear, uncertainty, and loss of control, exactly what he experienced 2 years ago. The chapter ends with Ethan's inner thoughts. Every thrill she feels is a silent victory. And this is just the beginning. After weeks of subtle manipulation, Ethan knew the time had come for the confrontation that would mark Lila forever. He had carefully orchestrated every detail, his appearances, his interventions, and the way he had undermined her confidence. Everything was ready for the truth and the power of his transformation to come to light. On the evening of a charity gala, where Lila was expected to shine and impress all the guests, Ethan made his entrance. But this time, he wasn't staying in the background. His imposing presence and immediate confidence captured everyone's attention. Lila felt a shiver of anxiety. He was no longer the boy she had humiliated, but a man powerful, elegant, and intimidating. Ethan approached her calmly, his face impassive. "Good evening, Lila. I think you remember me." Her soft but sharp voice echoed in his mind. The guests, witnesses to this charged moment, began to notice the tension between them. Lila felt her cheeks heat up, her heart beat faster. She was trapped. Ethan didn't need to say more, his gaze and his aura were enough to show the control he now had over her. Then, subtly, he revealed a truth she had never suspected: he hadn't just returned physically changed. He had worked, learned, built his career, and acquired a quiet but undeniable power in circles she admired. The murmurs of the guests around them began to confirm what she dared not believe. Lila felt helpless, humiliated, but fascinated by the transformation of the man she had once ridiculed. Ethan had not only prepared his revenge, both had done it with elegance and intelligence, leaving Lila alone to face her own mistakes and her past vanity. The chapter ends with Ethan's inner thoughts. "She now sees who I am. She understands what she has lost, and what she should have respected." The lesson is finally complete. The gala was in full swing, but for Lila, the world seemed to have shrunk to Ethan. Every smile, every gesture, every word from him testified to his transformation and the power she had never suspected. She was overwhelmed by a mixture of fear, admiration, and regret. Ethan approached her one last time, calmly, without arrogance, but with an authority that commanded respect. "Do you remember me, Lila?" he asked softly, letting his words hang in the air. She nodded, unable to speak. Memories of that humiliating night at school came flooding back, and for the first time, she understood what the real humiliation meant: not public ridicule, but loss of control, the feeling of helplessness in the face of someone she had underestimated. Ethan smiled slightly, but not cruelly. His revenge was not a violent or cruel act. It was perfect in its subtlety. He had shown Lila that every action had consequences, and that power could change hands silently and elegantly. Then he turned on his heel and left the room, leaving Lila alone among the guests, shaken and transformed by the realization of her own mistake. She had lost her control, her superiority, and had been confronted by the quiet strength of the one she had humiliated. Outside, Ethan took a deep breath. 2 years of patience, hard work, strategy, and preparation had paid off. He hadn't just avenged his past humiliation, he had proved that he was never weak, and that respect always had to be earned. The chapter ends with this thought from Ethan: "The perfect revenge is not the one that breaks, but the one that transforms." And I am finally free.